in the years prior to COVID, prior to the loss of that 1 million COVID jobs, in the 2 years prior to that, we'd already lost about 500,000 jobs, 460 something thousand jobs, as a result of the new crisis of capitalism that was emerging in 2017, 2018. We hadn't even got over the 2008-9 one, and a new crisis was emerging, and that's pretty much recognised by economists right around the world. So unemployment and job insecurity, and we ought to recognise unemployment is a generic term for underemployment and casualisation. People who don't know whether they got a job tomorrow or not. They're part of the unemployed issue. And that has been with us since the beginning of capitalism, and it'll be with us right through to the end. It's created by the competition and crisis and chaos of capitalism, overproduction 1 minute and slump the next. And they create the reserve army of workers, as Marx called it, the unemployed. And then they use that against us. They use that to reduce wages. They use it, as Moz said, to undermine conditions, undermine trade union organisation. This is capitalism at work. So I think job loss isn't an adequate term. You know, you lose your keys and then you find them again. You don't lose a job and then find another one. Job loss is to cover up the fact that this is part of the system. It's like calling murder life loss or theft property loss. There is a criminal, and for us, it's capitalism at work.
Yeah, you're certainly right there, Bill, that although we are seeing massive job losses under the pandemic, this has been going on long before the pandemic started. And the situation we're in now only highlights the cracks that were already there and will continue to be there long after the pandemic's over. And of course, this is the centenary year as well of the National Unemployed Workers Movement that was founded in 1921. And as Bill rightly puts, unemployment began with capitalism. And as long as capitalism is ruling our society, unemployment will survive. So we're constantly having to fight against this. And the fight obviously can grow at the moment. There's a lot more people that are going to be involved in this fight back than maybe would have been before the pandemic. So it is really time to involve everyone and make sure that everyone is aware that this is their fight too. So many people are one paycheck away from being homeless, who would have considered themselves secure prior to this crisis that we're under at the moment. And obviously the National Unemployed Workers Movement and hunger marches date back many years. It was 1922, 1929, 1930, 1932, 1934, 1936. And that, of course, helped prepare the way for a landslide Labour victory during the post-war. So this sort of action does work. It does have strength. There is strength in numbers. So we do need to continue this fight. And at that time, it even scared the Tories into the post-war full employment consensus. So there's no reason why we can't absolutely terrify them again.
That's right. I was going to just say a word about the post-war consensus, because right the way through, really, the 50s and 60s and into the 70s, it held. People were, you know, the ruling class was scared of mass resistance and unemployment following the post-war years, and it did stick, the post-war consensus. And it led to, be fair, it did lead to what the Tories really fear, that is trade union growth and militancy. And so right up into the time of the late 70s, we were managing to bring down unpopular governments, to get people released from jail, have been taking part in strike action, all the things that the trade union militancy of the 70s. And then, of course, there was the kickback from the ruling class, the Thatcherite kickback in the 80s, where they declared war on the working class through mass industrial destruction. The steel industry, the mining industry, the print industry, you just name them. And that resulted in the mass unemployment of the 80s, and the people's marches for jobs, which I can unfortunately well remember, being born in the 50s. So the people's marches for jobs and the growth of the unemployed workers centres, which we need to look at again. We need to look at these tactics again. And certainly workers' solidarity centres should be in every town, employed and unemployed workers working together in physical spaces or virtual spaces in order to get organised. We've already got unions with unemployed sections. Moses says she's already a member of two because she's in Unison and GMB, but obviously Unite Community are doing a fantastic job. But, you know, there are a huge number of campaigns now growing, and the party is very pleased to be amongst them. But we regard ourselves as amongst them. We're amongst the TUC Build Back Better, the individual union campaigns, the New Deal for Workers, No Turning Back, the Momentum have got a campaign, the People's Assembly have got a campaign. We got to bring all these together into a real fighting force, as they did in the 20s and 30s, organising and fighting in unions in our communities. And that's the session, obviously, it's going to be happening next week, how we go about that. But we have to just remember, I think, I hope you agree, Molly. Well, I'm sure you do. You said, as long as there's capitalism, we'll need to do this, which means we're going to have to do it over and over again. Unemployment is going to affect one generation after the other. So as well as a strategy against unemployment, which is absolutely a burning issue for the day, we have to start developing a strategy against capitalism, not wishful thinking, not hoping for the best, not sitting discussing what a beautiful world will emerge, not unless we make it. And I think that's our message. There is an alternative to capitalism, but we have to make it happen. Thanks, Mars. I think we're done.
Yeah, that's us. Thank you, Mars. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, comrades. You mentioned the workers' solidarity centres there, and I think it's just worth mentioning here for those that are involved in trades councils that Derby Area Trades Union Council has submitted an amendment to motion 4 on the Trades Council agenda. The Trades Council conference takes place on the 12th of June, that talks about our trade union councils movement helping to organise precarious and unemployed workers, and where possible, establishing local or online workers' solidarity centres for both the use of employed and unemployed workers. So there is an opportunity to develop the discussion both across trades councils and within the TUCs locally. I think I need to just give an apology to the start of our webinar, because apparently we weren't live streaming as we opened up. The full video will be available on the party website, so apologies for that, comrades and friends. The second the second section I'd like to introduce today is Mark Porter. Now, Mark Porter is the Unite convener at Rolls-Royce Barnoldswick, where great workplace organisation and solidarity between the workers and the local community won a recent outstanding victory against the threat of unemployment through a 9-week strike, defeating Rolls-Royce plans to export 350 jobs to Singapore. If you Google Mark, what comes up first is a post that was submitted in November 2020 that's titled "Our Outstanding Convener for Rolls-Royce, Barnoldswick." Now, I don't think you could have a better acclaim than that from the workers you're representing. Mark, the screen is yours.
Mars, I don't think he's in with us yet, and I can't see Johnny Butcher in, so maybe we should move up to Johnny Hunter.
I think you're muted, Mars.
Apologies, comrades. Social media and me are not really good friends. I'm doing my best, but please bear with me. Johnny is the General Secretary of the Young Communist League, whose youth charter published this year is attracting a lot of interest and support amongst young people and indeed older people. Johnny's from Glasgow, where he was a CP candidate in the recent Scottish Parliament election. I just want to give you a quick quote from the introduction of the YCL Youth Charter. And it says, "Capitalism in Britain has presented us with two options: accept the system as it is and a life without dignity, or to fight back and live life with a purpose. Britain's young communists are clear on our choice." Perfect introduction. Johnny, The screen is yours.
Thanks, Moz, and thanks very much the party for hosting this excellent and timely event. And thanks very much for the opportunity to speak, of course, on behalf of the Young Communist League. And thanks very much to all the other speakers and everyone watching up and down the country. As Moz mentioned, today I'm going to be talking about the YCL's Youth Charter. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic engulfed Britain, from any perspective, there was a crisis facing young people in particular, and you know, that manifests itself particularly with chronic youth unemployment and underemployment. And as comrades emphasised during the introduction, this has become, you know, it was already a major crisis pre-pandemic. It's become far more acute during the pandemic with the shutdown of the economy and the other resulting effects. We're also now set to lurch into a further crisis as we emerge from the pandemic. So what should the response of the left, the youth and the trade union movement be in this context? YCL's Youth Charter is a set of policies that does aim to combat that immediate crisis faced by the youth and to give some relief in that context. The Charter isn't a recipe for socialism, and we're not saying that these are policies that can cure the underlying problems of capitalism. These are demands, and demands that the struggle for them to achieve those demands, it would ask the fundamental questions about economic ownership and democratic control in Britain. And they would make a massive difference to the lives of millions of young people in Britain today. So the Charter has 10 demands, but there's a key focus within that on youth unemployment and underemployment. The first of the two demands are a real living wage and an end to casualisation and age discrimination in pay, and also a new apprenticeship system with real jobs and trade union and employment rights from day one. So what do we mean when we say a real living wage? It's something that gets cast about a lot. You know, it's even something that's enshrined in Tory government legislation, which, you know, to give them their due, was a pretty masterful PR move appropriating the term. But what communists mean by that is a real living wage for all workers of at least 10.44 per hour plus a London waiting. But within that, we also want to see a complete end to pay differentials for all workers under the age of 25, and an end to the legalisation and the enshrinement of the age discrimination in pay in legislation and in the regulations. And we also want to see a complete ban on 0 hours contracts, non-permanent contracts, and give day one employment rights and the right to equal treatment for all workers from day one. No requirement for the 2-year qualification period for certain rights such as protection from unfair dismissal. Many of these are demands that are already being championed by different parts of the trade union movement to different extents, but I think fundamentally there has been a failure to call out age discrimination in pay. And that's important for a number of reasons, not just because it means that young people up and down the country are being super exploited, but it also means that for bad employers, the majority of employers, young people offer that source of super exploitation. They offer a means to bring down the wages and conditions of all workers, especially older, more qualified workers in different parts of the labour market. And within that, that also means that young people are the tool for achieving that. And the failure of the trade union movement to champion that right, I think, is in large part one of the reasons that we do see lower levels of trade union membership among young people in different parts of Britain. And really taking on that aim and championing it, in the local and the national disputes and in the national political arena would go a large way, I think, in making trade unions more relevant to young workers. The second demand of the Youth Charter, which is equally important, especially in this context of massive youth unemployment, is a new apprenticeship system with real jobs and trade union rights from day one. And by that we mean a new government-backed apprenticeship system that's focused on real skills and real jobs, and with that real living wage. We want a statutory right for an apprenticeship or a 2-year work placement for all school leavers up to the age of 25. And we acknowledge that to make these new jobs possible, we do need public ownership and massive investment in utilities and industries to rebuild Britain's economy. Now, one of the scandals that we face just now is the use and abuse of the apprenticeship system that we currently have by big employers, who are largely using this as a tool to access, as we mentioned, cheap, discounted and even free labour, but also massive government subsidies. It's a particularly useful tool both for these companies and the government, because they can try and say they're doing something about youth unemployment, but in actual fact, there's no guarantee of job security, progression, or even long-lasting and transferable skills from these apprenticeships. What we do need to see is a return to planning for full employment, planning for full youth unemployment, and an apprenticeship system that's based on the demands of this Green New Deal that the labour movement and different parts of the left are fighting for. Not only is it desirable, it's fundamentally necessary if we're to avoid another lost generation as we emerge from this pandemic. Now, these demands, we don't just say these are demands for the YCL or the Communist Party. We think these are demands that the broad working class, youth, student movements need to rally around. And these are demands that can be translated into the thousands of struggles that are taking place every day in schools and campuses, communities, workplaces. These are demands, as I mentioned, that the trade union movement needs to take to its core if it is to continue what have been, exciting gains that have been made recently. We've seen trade union membership increasing year on year for the first time in a while. We still face the issue that this is predominantly among older workers. It's predominantly among public sector workers. We need to be reaching young workers where they are, making the movement relevant to their demands. And I was asked to discuss just in brief the fact that these were demands that the Communist Party was putting front and centre in what was its biggest electoral campaign since the 1980s, just a few months ago. And the fact was, it was only the Communist Party, by and large, that was raising these fundamental issues of economic ownership, control, and tackling the crisis of youth unemployment up and down the country. And that received a very warm response, not just from young workers, from workers of all ages, who recognise the scale of this crisis and recognise that we need radical action to be taken. So much like many of the people that encountered the Communist Party, especially young people for the first times in their lives during that election campaign, I'd encourage you to go and read the Youth Charter, not just the first two demands, but all the demands. Think about how these demands can be taken into your trade union branch. If you're a student organisation as well, the student movement, your community council, into all of these organisations that make up the broad movement on the left. So read the Charter and consider joining the YCL and the Communist Party.
Thank you, Johnny. That was excellent and lays out really well the future that we have to fight for across our age ranges. Now I'm going to take Johnny Butcher next from Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise, and then I'll introduce Helen O'Connor. Johnny Butcher is the organiser for Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise, organising low-paid gig economy and precarious workers. Johnny is working on rolling out this programme across the country. Leeds Get Organised is the first, launched by Leeds Trades Council on May Day this year. And my very own Trades Council, Derby Area Trade Union Council, has just started discussions with Johnny about how we might do the same in Derby. But it's an opportunity for all of us. Johnny, over to you. The screen is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's an absolute honour. So yeah, as I just said, I'm working with Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise. So I'm not the organiser for Sheffield, but I'm working to expand the project across the country. But I thought I'd tell you a bit about how Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise is addressing some of the issues in I think underlying and facing the trade union movement today. So for those of you who don't know, Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise is a campaign that's a collaboration. It's a collaboration between the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union, the local community in Sheffield, and Sheffield Trades Council, who in effect came together because they saw that the trade union movement was by and large bypassing the low paid, largely sort of service sector workers that have dominated our towns and cities since the decline of manufacturing and heavy industries in the 80s. There's no secret that the trade union membership is declining in this country, despite a couple of days ago we're hearing that trade union membership is rising. But it is declining fast amongst young workers, and it's declining fast amongst private sector workers. There's no evidence that young people are hostile to trade unions. It's just maybe that the chances are they've never actually worked in an industry where they've ever been asked to join a trade union. So given this, we need to think about ways of organising workers who work in the sectors where there is very low trade union density. Those are the kind of places that we're focusing on with Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise. So the fast food restaurants, hospitality, but there's also other industries around sort of distribution and call centres. The trade union movement is in a bit of a sort of sticky situation where, quite understandably, a lot of the bigger trade unions don't want to invest some of the sort of tighter resources that they have in organising precarious workers because of the fear that it doesn't make any economic sense for them. Frankly put, workers don't stick around in these industries very long, so putting a lot of resources in trying to recruit, say, like a fast food worker doesn't make a lot of financial sense for the trade unions. When they're under attack, it makes more sense to use the resources they have to organise workers in their existing base to sort of build where they're strong. But the longer that we ignore workers in the low-paid sectors, the bigger an issue it's going to be. First of all, a large section of the working class is increasingly getting employed in this sort of precarious, like, new sector of the economy. And secondly, some of the work practices that were sort of pioneered in the new sectors of the economy are now sort of dripping in to the more established, more unionised sector of the economy. So basically, what Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise is doing is it's a cross-union project that's starting with an organising first, workers to the front. So it's around building and identifying, supporting and developing workers to build unions in their workplace. And as low-paid service sector workers, crucially, it's around building a movement in a city that holds them in the movement as they move from workplace to workplace. Because, as I say, one of the issues with trade unions is that typically young, insecure workers may have the enthusiasm to organise their workplace, but then 2, 3, 4 weeks later, they might be in a new workplace, and then that energy, the training, all the energy and the resources that are being put into supporting that work, it can kind of dissipate. Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise is trying to address that issue by building like a citywide movement, so that we have, in effect, activity that goes beyond workplaces, such as community canvassing, and we're building a committee of workers across workplaces to keep them in, to keep training them, and also linking them up with the relevant unions in their workplace as they move, say, for example, from a fast food place to a call centre. We've been going a few years now. The last couple of years, it's got really exciting. We've won very sort of bread and butter issues in places like KFC, in some fast food places like Papa John's, in places like some of the pub chains that are dominating our high streets. Going forward, we're looking to expand this model. So it's the genius of what we're doing is it's a partnership between the Bakers Union and the local community. It's funded by the local community. It's funded by the trade union movement through trades councils. We've got the exciting prospects of starting in Leeds in a few months' time. We've just done a launch of that campaign there. We're recruiting an organizer at the moment, and they're going to get to work in the summer. Going forward, I think it's already been said, we're building links with trades councils across the country. We've got some promising signs of starting in Rotherham in the autumn, and many more. So if anybody is interested, as anyone, particularly if you're active in your local trades council, please give me a shout. I think my details will probably be passed around in the email. If not, you can go on to leadsgetorganised.org.uk and you'll find some contact details there. Anyway, I'll leave it there. And anyway, as I say, nice to meet you all, and thank you for your time.
Okay, Johnny, very important contribution there. So thank you very much for that. There are some questions coming into the chat and answer box. So I'll pick up on a couple of those after our next speaker, who I am delighted to introduce, Helen O'Connor. Helen is a member of the People's Assembly National Steering Committee and GMB Southern Region Senior Speaker for Health Workers, and as such a genuinely tireless organiser for the NHS and its workers of all kinds. Just before I hand over to Helen, I think it's worth noting that during this recession, women are seeing much higher levels of redundancy than in previous recessions. And the information the TUC has produced says that women have accounted for 60% of job losses in accommodation and food, and 58% of job losses in wholesale and retail. Across the board, women now account for 52% of job losses, whereas male job losses is the wrong word, I know, but losses in employment for men is 48%. That is a significant change to previous recessions. But Helen, over to you. The screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Bos, and thank you for inviting me to speak. So I'm going to talk about the insecure work in the NHS, and the rise of outsourcing in the NHS in particular is on a parallel with the rise of the gig economy. And we're rapidly losing stable, secure jobs across the entire workforce in the NHS. Not so long ago, when you had a job in the NHS, in any role, you had a job for life. This is no longer the case. NHS service restructuring is now commonplace and frequent, and that brings with it cuts to frontline staffing and a mixed model of service provision, which is code for privatisation, basically. Every job role from domestic right through to doctor is unstable and terms and conditions are being cut. Decent NHS pensions, additional payments for using your car for work, psychiatric leave payments, mufti allowances, everything's just either gone already or being gradually taken away. Doctors who've completed their basic training now have no jobs to go to. Nurses find themselves restructured, down-banded or redeployed into work where they become de-skilled over time, and then their jobs are put at risk. As hospital trusts merge and services are reduced and concentrated under the new integrated care systems, ICS, we will see an acceleration of jobs, basically, frontline jobs going, and those are the jobs where care is delivered or services are delivered directly to patients. The NHS White Paper makes provision for the Secretary of State to abolish professional or remove or merge professional regulatory bodies, and this will enable a breakdown of the professional groups and allow for a more rapid conversion of highly skilled trained jobs like nursing to unskilled roles that attract lower pay, and this will have a detrimental impact on ethics and standards of patient care within the NHS. So pay terms and conditions are being driven down for the outsourced workers as well. These are the porters, the cleaners, the catering staff. Hours are being casualised, sick pay is being lost, pay enhancement for unsocial hours is being lost, and now it's very, very difficult for people to get full-time permanent jobs in any of these roles in the NHS. And of course, casualisation will always make workers more vulnerable to be exploited by employers. The outsourced workers are under ferocious attack because they're at the mercy of companies like Mighty and ISS, and we have to be really clear that these contractors are exploitative. And outsourced employers, they don't treat workers like they're valuable employees, they treat them like they're disposable units, and the whole aim of the game basically is to boost the profits for the company at the expense of pay terms and conditions. And only in the last few days, Mighty workers in St. George's Hospital in Tooting, they've worked really hard throughout the pandemic. 3 of them who are GMB members actually died. They caught COVID-19 and died. Now these workers are finding that they're not even being paid in full for the hours that they're working. They're finding that they're short paid 15, 20 and 30 hours. And these are low paid workers. So this pay is literally rent and food and gas meter payments closed for the kids. And yesterday, dozens of these workers approached GMB to report that their pay was short. And when they tried to report it to management, they were told, well, the manager won't be back till after bank holiday weekend. And Mighty in particular rests on the fact that so many of these workers don't speak English, they're disabled, and they're particularly vulnerable. They can't even, some of them, get access to their pay slips, and that's actually illegal, but these companies regularly flout the law on this all the time. But the mighty workers in St. George's are willing to fight back. They'll be having a protest next Thursday lunchtime outside the front of St. George's Hospital. So I'm asking that everybody on this call shows them full solidarity and support while they battle mighty for their most basic rights to be paid for the hours that they're worked. And I just want to make the point that there's serious consequences for all of us, which flow from the impact of cuts and privatisation in the NHS. There's a direct link between infections in hospital and the privatisation of cleaning services. And I have seen myself the dire consequences for patients of untrained and inexperienced staff being allocated tasks beyond their competence or their level of experience. And increasing numbers of people are suffering because they're waiting months on waiting lists for treatment that they need. And A&E departments are becoming increasingly difficult to access. And I think the pandemic has revealed to everyone that public health is not a priority for this government. And even during a national disaster like a pandemic, cash was funneled into private companies who ultimately failed the nation. And NHS staff who did deliver for us during the pandemic are now recognising their value to society, and that's why they're quite rightly demanding an across the board 15% restorative pay rise, which isn't even a pay rise at all. It's just recouping some of what's been lost over the last decade in pay terms and conditions in the NHS. And at the end of the day, even the Prime Minister of this country had to rely on the NHS to save his life during the pandemic. And why didn't he go private? He has the money to pay. He didn't go private because when the chips are down, the National Health Service was the only organisation that had the expert personnel, equipment and know-how to save his life. So the protection of the NHS is everyone's concern, because even if you don't work in it, you will use it at some stage in your life. So we cannot sit back and allow the human right to healthcare that is free at the point of need to be taken away from our class, because that's what's happening right now. This is why I'm appealing to everybody to unequivocally back the 15% pay rise for all NHS staff, to back all NHS trade union disputes, because these workers are not just fighting for themselves, they're fighting to protect the services that we all need. Thank you.
Absolutely, Helen. And I'm sure we'd want to send all our solidarity wishes to those workers at St. George's Hospital fighting for their rights, and also to all NHS workers who are fighting for the 15% pay rise. And we should be clear, this is our health service, this is our workers. And we should, even if it's putting a poster in your window, download one and get it up there, and let's show the support that should be there across the class. I just need to say a couple of things. One is, you'll have noticed in the chat box, it's not just things like ambulances encroaching on our time here this morning on the sound system, but we've also got some people that want to try and disrupt our session today. Please ignore them. We'll deal with that. This issue is of vital importance to all of us. But I would just suggest to the panelists that if you've got your mobile phone there, that you stick it on mute so you don't get interrupted. I'm going to call on our next speaker, Steve Turner. I think we're nearly bang on time as it happens. So Steve is the Assistant General Secretary of Unite, with a key responsibility for workers in manufacturing, in the manufacturing industry, who amongst many important roles and struggles, including Rolls-Royce Barnard's Whip, has played a leading role in winning furlough from the government. No insignificant success, a huge success. So Steve is also co-chair of the People's Assembly. Steve, I am going to hand the screen over to you.
Great. Okay, thanks for that, Moz. What a fantastic event it's been so far this morning. Inspiring speakers. I mean, some very personal experiences. The story that Helen just relayed about the workers at St. George's, John, Johnny, you know, all of our previous speakers have been on the button when it comes to describing the obscenity of the current economic and political situation that so many of our colleagues live through right now here in the UK, and indeed at a global level as well, of course. I think COVID's demonstrated the case for socialism better than any book that's been written in the course over the course of the last 30 years, and certainly has given people a life experience that's driving them towards the need for a very real change in our economy and indeed our politics. We've seen those growing inequalities that we've all known have been with us for generations and generations, the failures and the corruption of the state, of the government, the contracts, the billions of pounds of taxpayers' money that's been handed over to mates that have no experience in any of these fields, looking after ordinary working people, of course. And the success, the one success through this whole process has been the one thing that our wonderful National Health Service has been responsible for, and that's the vaccination of our people. So, you know, those that have borne the brunt, and we just heard the experiences, you yourself identified it earlier, Moss, about women being at the front line when it comes to people losing their jobs, being put on furlough. More women have been on furlough during the course of this COVID pandemic than men. 54% of those that have been furloughed have been women. And that's really an indication of the sorts of sectors that were hit really hard and the way in which women are forced into particular sectors of the economy. And you see it with young people. You know, the case that was outlined earlier about where young people see themselves betrayed in an economy right now with very little hope and opportunity of a decent, stable, skilled, well-paid, unionised job. We've seen the old paying the price, of course, with the poverty of pension. We've seen those that are in our BAM communities dying at disproportional levels to others. And of course, we've seen the sick and the disabled very much at the forefront of the attack from a virus that nobody could have predicted, but the failure of government to protect, that there can be no excuses for. And as that public inquiry opens up, just as soon as it can open, and we demand that that be opened immediately, we'll be first in line to give evidence. Of course, we've seen growing unemployment. We're over 5% now in the unemployment statistics. We've got many, many millions that are relying on those universal credit payments and that additional £20 we secured in addition to the furlough that this government again want to rip away from some of the most vulnerable within society. And of course, many didn't get it in the first instance because they refused to give it to those that were on legacy benefits in the system. So, you know, we've got food banks, we've got clothing banks, we've got a housing crisis, we've got a crisis of decent jobs, actually. There's plenty of jobs out there that are exploitative, and we've heard very practical examples of some of them this morning. We have got that crisis of good jobs that impacts on low pay, short hours, 0 hours, precarious jobs, a lack of skills, as I said earlier, hope, real hope and opportunity of a decent job. I love what they're doing in Sheffield, and Johnny's outline there of that Sheffield needs a pay rise claim. And if that can spread to other towns and cities across our nations, then we'll be all the better for it. Because what we do, of course, now is we reject any return to that old normal that we know so well and we've spoken about. We are at a crossroads, and the demand for full employment, which is the real sort of case for today's programme, is very much with us. And what that full employment might look like is going to be one of the challenges for us of the decade to come. That shorter working time, the argument for shared work, and with it the argument for our fair share of the wealth that we create, that common wealth that working people create in our society, the productivity gains that come from an increased use of automation and artificial intelligence, sharing work amongst all of us so that we do genuinely create full employment, but perhaps at 20-hour weeks as opposed to 36, 38 or 40-hour weeks. Let's think about the potential for human beings to actually achieve what we deserve to achieve as human beings for a change, to fulfill our true potential as human beings. And I have a vision for that and an ambition to achieve that during the course of my lifetime. We proved that we can do this, that there is a new economy to be built and there is a different politics to be maintained. We did win furlough, and who would have thought that we'd have had that fantastic victory just over a year ago now in forcing the government to become the employer, or at least the payer of last resort, if not the employer of last resort, to over 11.5 million working people. Every one of those, that money's going back into a family, it's supporting a community, and is avoiding evictions for tens of thousands of people that are able to pay their rent and put food on the table, put clothing on their children and indeed themselves. So we are at that crossroads, really. And now it's about political choices to build a new politics and that new economy, to secure that new deal for working people that we talk so much about. And we can do that. We've got many challenges in front of us, of course, as we recover and rebuild from COVID. What does that look like as we deal with the Brexit fallout and building new trade relationships with others around the world, as we address the introduction of artificial intelligence and automation? And, you know, as importantly as all of these, in fact, probably more importantly, as we deal with the climate crisis and we green and clean our towns and our cities and green our economy and create those millions of new jobs in the green economy that we can create in our public services, reducing our school sizes and employing more teachers and teaching assistants and additional staff in our schools, as we provide a care system that is so desperately needed in addition to our National Health Service, but completely adjacent and part of our National Care Service. Whether it's attacking the 10 years of austerity politics that have removed so many of the local services from our communities. Now we've got councils that can't provide statutory services, let alone the desperately needed services in communities up and down our nations. And indeed, we've got whole local authorities now filing for bankruptcy because they simply have spent the silver over the course of the last 10 years of failed austerity politics. So all of that can happen in our public sector, of course, but in our private sector, we can transition that as well. We can actually build the council homes that we need, the 1 million council homes that we need. Let's have a positive program to do that and train our youngsters in the skills that they need in construction and building materials, electricians, plumbers, roofers, builders, all of those that we need and we've lacked for generations now. Opportunities for people to go into real skills. Let's retrofit the rest of our housing stock. Let's generate the green energy that we need to generate. Let's manufacture the goods that we need to produce the products we need in our nations. Here in the UK, let's bring our supply chains home. Let's create the millions of new jobs in our industrial heartlands, truly levelling up, not levelling down, which is the practical reality of what Tory rhetoric will lead to if we're not careful. We've got to level up our nations and our communities, of course, and we've got to bring our industrial heartlands and our manufacturing base back centre stage. If we're going to export those high value goods around the globe in order to bring in the external revenue that then allows us to pay for the public services that we desperately need. So I'll just end on this, Moss, that none of this just happens. None of this just happens. Nothing happens in society. You know, the whole history of working class struggle is exactly that, a struggle. And it's called a struggle because it's not a stroll in the park. It's called a struggle because it's bloody hard work. So we've got to organise for it. We've got to mobilise. We've got to build alliances. We've got to get on the streets with the People's Assembly national demonstration on the 26th of June, and I'll make a plug for that. We've got to build our People's Assembly movement across all of our towns and cities in our nations. We've got to inspire and we've got to motivate. We've got to get in people's faces in our workplaces, on the bus, down the pub when they open again properly, in our communities, in our homes. You've got to have that discussion. You've got to inspire with a real radical, practical agenda that brings working class people in our communities with us on this journey and make sure we leave nobody behind, no worker, no family, no community behind on our journey towards a greener economy. Now, I'm confident that we can do that. I'm proud of the work that we're doing at the moment, and I view meetings like this that open up this battle of ideas to all of those within not just our community, our political community, but to take them out into our wider communities as being an essential platform for us on that journey. And I'll leave it there, Moz.
Steve, that's just brilliant. I said at the beginning we had some keynote speakers. I should have said we have inspiring speakers, because I think all our speakers so far have given us ideas about how we take forward the issue of unemployment, how we take forward what we mean by a new normal, which isn't the same old, but is about a new economy. but also makes it very, very clear that we ordinary working people are in control of that. We have to take it forward. So I'm looking at the timetable, and we've timetabled in a 5-minute break at this point. We have Harsif Baines from the Indian Workers Association coming in after the 5-minute break. There have been questions put in the question and answers, which panelists that have spoken so far might like to take the opportunity to respond to. I know some of the issues have been addressed within the members' within the panelists' contributions, but if you want to add anything, please click on the type answer. So 5 minutes, comrades, and then we'll be back 5 minutes to give you a comfort break, and then we'll be back in to look at our next range of speakers that are developing our theme around unemployment and what we do about it. Thank you.
Very good. Well done, Moz.
High-risk places where germs have no respect. Scientists say close them before we all catch our death. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, girls? Which side are you on? Education staff and students, you can go to hell. We'll fine you if you're truant, mums and dads as well. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, girls? Which side are you on? Well, if you must lead us into a second spike, don't say we didn't warn you when we walk out on strike. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, girls? Which side are you on? Pipe down, you troublemakers who like to whinge and shirk. It's all about the kids. Now let's get back to work. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, girls? Which side are you on? Yes, it's all about the kids. Their futures are at stake. Revising for exams they shouldn't have to take. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, girls? Which side are you on? They crucified the miners for trying to save their jobs, and they won't forgive the teachers for saving people's lives. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, girls? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? safest places where germs have no respect. Scientists say close them before we all catch our death. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, girls? Which side are you on? Education staff and students, you can go to hell. We'll fine you if you're truant, mums and dads as well. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, girls? Which side are you on? Well, if you must lead us into a second spike, don't say we didn't warn you when we walk out on strike. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, girls? Which side are you on? Pipe down, you troublemakers who like to whinge and shirk. It's all about the kids, now let's get back to work. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, girls? Which side are you on? Yes, it's all about the kids, their futures are at stake. Revising for exams.
Okay, comrades and friends, welcome back. Very inspiring speakers to start off, and we have more inspiring speakers to continue with the afternoon. The first of which is Harsif Bains, the National Vice President of the Indian Workers Association and trustee of the Marx Memorial Library. Harsif is a long life campaigner against racism and imperialism and super exploitation, discrimination and oppression of Black workers. He is a member of the Communist Party of India Marxist and its British section, the Association of Indian Communists. Harsif, the screen is yours.
Thank you. And thank you for that wonderful warm welcome. It's going to be very difficult, comrades and friends, to follow on from Steve, because he's pretty much summed it all up, and it shows why we all support him to be the next General Secretary, who will be a worthy leader for all of us. And I say that more particularly because one thing that was missed in Moz's thing was I'm also a lifelong member of Unite and progressed through the trade union movements to Unite, and now supporter of the Unite in the community, which hopefully other trade unions will follow on from, is something that I think we can all learn from, something that's going to become quite critical, which I will try and explain in a couple of minutes that we have. Look, something that is happening around us, and I think the time bomb is ticking away to 1st of September. What that's going to show and demonstrate to us will be a scene that I don't think even in our worst nightmares we could have possibly imagined. We are now receiving figures for, and I'll refer to this area because it's about racism as well. I think I need to link to it. I come from West London and I've been part of the aviation industry. And what we're talking about, the hotels or the retail sector, one thing that is missing that we need to recognize is something that is going to hit us, is the aviation industry, especially in West London where I live. We've just analyzed the figures for Southall. Southall, those of you that may be familiar with this part of the country, is a town that's occupied by more diverse nationalities and people than anywhere else. Has the highest number of different languages spoken there. But much more, it has the highest rate of furloughed workers. And it has the highest now rate of unemployment claims. If those two things don't ring alarm bells, I don't know what will. Moz has already mentioned the women's aspect of this. The women are going to be the highest. Again, in Southall, that's going to be the highest. Young people are going to be the highest. Some of these people that are coming out of aviation on 1st September will be told you have no jobs, are people who've worked there for 30, 40 years. Some haven't even developed different language skills, never mind trying to fill in a CV or apply for a new job. The job centers have disappeared. I think we talked about, heard about unemployment worker centers. I'd like to see one in our locality because there isn't one. The only people who are out there at the moment to unite in the community, trying to engage with people, and people like ourselves. Already we're beginning to feel the tensions developing with the community as people say, British jobs for British workers. I've had it worse, actually, said worse than that. That racism will come, and we need to be aware of it and to confront it, that together, as every single song, every single speaker, every single sentence that we've uttered today is about unified action. We started, I think, with organize, educate, and I forget the words now. Agitate, educate, and organize. Yes, the key tenets of every communist. But we need that. We need that in our communities, because something that is happening, as I said, it's just not because the aviation is very central to us, but it's happening in Leicester, another town that I'm very familiar with. It's happening in Derby, where people are going to become unemployed for the very first time. It happened in the late 70s under Margaret Thatcher, and we had the People's March for Jobs 1 and 2. Now we got people's assemblies. I think we need to reinvigorate them. We certainly need to support every single trades council up and down the country. And if you're not a member, the only way I think you can help is join us. Join the trade union movement, join the trade union movement in its true sense. Because once the biggest difficulty, and I will leave it there because I know you got lots of wonderful speakers, once the biggest difficulties we're going to have this time around is because people are going to be laid off and made redundant while they're at home. They will not have direct communication with colleagues at work. Never mind organizing strikes and pickets. Not that that's allowed, and secondary picketing, solidarity actions is not allowed. So how are they going to organize? It's going to be incumbent upon us having organized little meetings in every single community that we're here together. We're in it together. We hear it from the government. We hear it from everybody else, but they don't really mean it. I'm not in together with Priti Patel or Rishi Sunak. You know, it's not Rishi Sunak. I'm together with the people. So we have to be together as communists, as socialists, as trade unionists. Together, we will win. I'm sure of it. And I thank you very much for the opportunity of speaking today. And all I say to you is, while you're thinking about all the other aspects of it, remember the racist element. Institutional racism is still pretty much there. And we're already beginning to receive messages that, you know, things would be better if the numbers were reduced, number of migrants in this country. I think we all matter. And I think we all need to work collectively. Thank you.
Thanks, Harsif. I think that's a very important point to finish on. In the chat box, you'll have seen there is a link to the recently produced TUC report on unemployment, on the impact on Black workers of unemployment and the increase and rise within their communities. So very important. Lots of information that you can pick up in the chat box. So thank you, Harsif. When we started the webinar, Molly referred to international speakers as well as speakers, keynote speakers from around the country. I'm delighted to introduce now Ricard Juan Estrich and his interpreter Julio, who I hope are on the screen. Ricard is head of the Communist Party of Spain Workers' Movement section and members of the party Central Committee. He will be talking, or they will be talking, on struggles against precarious gig economy work and the current development of legislation against it in Spain. Julio is the interpreter and CPB and PCE member living in Sunderland. So Ricard, I think you're introducing the speak, and at some point Julio will be taking over the full speak. Both of you, welcome to the screen.
Buenos días, camaradas. En primer lugar, desde el Partido Comunista de España, gracias por vuestra invitación a este acto.
Good morning, comrades. In first place, thanks for the invitation for the Communist Party of Spain to be here.
Bueno, en segundo lugar, yo me presento. Soy Ricard Juan Escrits, responsable de Movimiento Obrero del Partido Comunista de España.
In second place, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Ricard Juan Escrits, and I'm the head of the workers' movement in the Communist Party of Spain.
También soy dirigente sindical, secretario general de comisiones obreras de SEAT, que es la empresa del sector del automóvil.
I'm also general secretary I'm leader of the union and general secretary of comisiones obreras in SEAT, in the car company.
Y bueno, como no tengo la suerte de hablar en inglés, pues os dejo con el camarada Julio para que os exponga la traducción, la traducción de la aportación por parte del Partido Comunista de España.
As I'm not lucky enough to speak English, he's leaving you with me, so I'll do the translation of his. I've done the translation of his speech, so I hope is as accurate as possible. Capitalism has always used technological and scientific advances as well as new working systems to increase its profits by intensifying the degree of labor exploitation. In this case, under the cynical name of collaborative economy, using digitization and technological progress to individualize and lead workers to extreme competition, with endless daily and weekly working shifts, criminally endangering their lives so that the companies can obtain huge profit margins. Glovo is a mobile, tablet, or computer application to request all kinds of urban deliveries. Being a rider is relatively easy. You just have to register in the platform account, and once an order has been granted, you collect it and deliver it. And for this, it is not even necessary to have your own vehicle. You can rent public bikes, for example. Riders take orders, especially food, from restaurants to customers, and the digital platform establishes the rate they receive, the way to collect products, the time and mode of delivery of each service. And there is no direct deal with the customer. So the entire employment relationship is through the application. Even dismissal, which is done by simply blocking the rider's access of the platform. One of the most perverse elements of control to make riders compete for work is the so-called system of excellence, a valuation system established unilaterally by the company, where the distributors are scored by consumers for their availability, for the hours worked in times of high demand, and for the number of deliveries in the shortest time possible, as well as by the numbers of orders taken. The more high demand hours, especially weekends, the higher your score will be. The more points, more work, better time slots, and more income. The less availability and deliveries, the less points, orders, and income. In this situation of sort of total deregulation, rentals and transfers of accounts inside these digital platforms are very common. And the most vulnerable social sectors are the ones that most easily fall into these practices in order to survive. Glovo or Deliveroo, for example, employ more than 7,000 riders as self-employed workers, so that the relationship is not a labor one, company worker, but a commercial one, company. In this way, they manage to individualize and make the workers compete, preventing from legally organizing themselves in unions and being subject to working conditions regulated by labor legislation and collective bargaining. Without time limits, they can end up working more than 14 to 16 hours a day for 7 days a week, earning income based on the piece of rate. So much work, so much money. In addition to this, it is the workers who must bear the costs and be left without protection in case of illness or work accident. And high rates of fatigue and work lead to numerous accidents and even several deaths in the jobs. Like the case of a young man run over in Barcelona, who was not even registered on the platform and was distributing with the account of a third person, that sort of rental and transfer of accounts we were talking about before. Glovo is a company that was created in 2015 with an initial capital of 3,000 euros. and its expansion has been meteoric, with a turnover that went from 106,600 euros in 2015 to 14.2 million euros in 2017. Due to multiple investments of financial funds in recent years, the company already has presence in 70 large cities and has been extended to more than 20 countries. An example of technological business of the 21st century that emerged from the internet and digitization. Companies that manage millionaire assets of others and thousands of collaborators, but account for very few of these, in a trend where capitalism becomes more liquid and invisible. Cases like Uber or Cabify offer taxi services without having cars or drivers, or Airbnb has no hotel or staff in charge, however, offers 2 million flats in 190 countries. These companies spread around the world without control, using the resources of their collaborators, cars, flats, workforce, earning billions of euros with hardly any investment, taking few risks with using other people's resources, without investing, or with hardly any workers under their care. The beginnings of the collaborative economy use digitization and internet to share or exchange things. Capitalism has commercialized this idea to transform it into an economy of digital control, which parasites the resources of others and imposes an ultra-liberal model of extreme job insecurity based on self-employed, poorly paid, and completely isolated workers. These new companies disregard trade union rights, labor laws, and jeopardize all social protection. But despite the difficulties imposed by this new model of capitalism, the working class always finds a way to organize and fight collectively. Just as technological digitization serves capitalism, workers have also used it to coordinate on platforms. Riders por Derechos, or Riders for Rights, for example, is one of these organizations. And they use it to challenge the abuses by the bosses. And the way they do this, things like organizing different protests and strikes at peak order distribution hours. For over a year, they have begun to organize themselves in unions, and they're starting to demand that the Labour Inspection Agency and the magistracy recognize an employment relationship so the company is responsible for guaranteeing and responding to safety and risk protection at work. There are already several court rulings and the doctrine of the Supreme Court that recognize that these workers should be employed and are actually false self-employed. Or there's also an investigation by the Work Inspection Agency that concluded in several cities that Glovo's labor model does not adapt to labor legislation. And in this case, the Social Security Treasury is also demanding that these companies paid the unpaid social contributions by these workers, included in the investigation. But what's the role of the left? So the role of the left is fundamental to combat this capitalism 4.0, to organize these precarious and atomized sectors, both when denouncing this ultra-liberal work model and when fighting it from society and institutions. We must show solidarity with the struggles of these sectors for their living and working conditions. It is essential for the future that the left and class unionism firmly fight for unity of the entire working class, from the most traditional industrial to public employees and to the new urban proletariat. In Spain, the greatest expression of the fight against this Uberization of the economy is the Riders' Law, recently approved by the Spanish government, promoted by the third Vice President, Minister of Labour and militant of the Communist Party of Spain, Yolanda Díaz Pérez, with agreements between the government, the employers' organisation and the unions. After months of negotiations, which has even led to Glovo's exit of the COE, which is the Spanish Confederation of Employers Organization, sort of representing business interests. It's a pioneering law in the European Union and internationally to face these new forms of exploitation based on the individualization of labor relations, which requires the hiring of workers from digital platforms. A legal reform that protects about 20,000 distributors and that will be expanded to cover other groups that can be considered false self-employed. The law modifies two sections of the Workers' Statute, clarifying that the distributors of digital platforms are employees and not self-employed, and for the first time, the right of the workers' representatives to be informed by the company of the algorithms or artificial intelligence systems that can affect working conditions, hiring, or maintaining employment. The law gives 3 months until mid-August from the publication in the official state bulletin for the new rule to be deployed. From now on, the platforms have to contribute to social security for the distributors without exceptions, and riders will also have the rights and coverage that corresponds to unemployed persons, such as breaks, paid vacation, disability benefits, or unemployment benefits. And that's, I hope that's a true translation.
Julio, thank you very much for that. I have got a question posted in the chat box, particularly in relation to the issue that you're raising with us, which is demonstrating that the question of unemployment isn't just one for Britain alone. It is the system we work on is a worldwide capitalist system, and the issues that you are facing, or that Ricard is facing, are as important in considering our tactics as how we develop the work at home. So the question I have is asking for an example of a success in trade unions organising flexibility. Can you ask, and could a reply to that be put in chat? I think you've talked about the success of the riders, but if there's a chance to answer that question in the chat box, that would be exceedingly helpful. Thank you, Julio. Our next speaker, apologies, comrades, my chairing has been such that we appear to be running a bit behind, so apologies for that. However, our next speaker is Jackie Simpkins of War on Want. You'll have seen Jackie actually posted a question in the chat box about how we deal with organising workers now in workplaces, when workplaces in many places don't actually exist anymore for the individual. So how do we deal with new ways to organise? It's also a question that Hasif raised. So it's a real serious one for us. We know, certainly I know, that within Zoom meetings that I've attended of members, there tend to be more members of my union involved than if there is a face-to-face physical meeting organised. But that doesn't mean to say that collectively we are able to organise and work together in that way as we need to. So Jackie, I'm going to pass the screen over to you. Thank you very much for joining us today, and the screen is yours.
Thank you. Thanks very much, everybody, and thanks for inviting me. Yes, the point in the chat, I was saying, listening to everybody else, was that having visited partners across the Global South and seeing how they go about organising, quite often, in the informal economy, which I'll come on to, and it is all about organising almost kind of secretly in marketplaces, sometimes being allowed to go to workers' homes to do it, but just because your standard factory gate organising is just puts you in peril. However, you have massive successes in getting union membership up by doing it that way. And that is something that sort of fits with probably the newer industries, if we want to call them that. But anyway, I'll just sort of move on. That I wanted to say is that the global pandemic has seen more than 250 million jobs last year to COVID-19. And the ITUC is estimating that a further 130 million jobs are at risk this year. And this unprecedented global crisis has demonstrated the abject failure of the economic, social, and political system. The pandemic has shone a light on those workplaces and sectors where poor pay and conditions have become almost normalized, where the gap between rich and poor has grown exponentially, and where wealth is rewarded while poverty is punished. Meanwhile, multinational corporations have seen their profits rise as they shake off responsibility for, but simultaneously shift the risk onto their workers. Health risks, unemployment, and destitution play out along lines of inequalities in wealth, gender, class, and race across the world. And the future of work involves a recognition that issues that affect working people in the Global South are also issues that trade union members are campaigning against here in the UK, like privatisation and cuts to public services, global neoliberal policies, austerity, and the erosion of labour rights. And if we look to the global south, we saw that in India, farmers and trade unions took to the streets in November in some of the biggest protests the world has ever seen against new agricultural laws that represent a corporate takeover of the food system, handing power to big business and threatening the livelihoods of millions. Small-scale farmers risk losing their land, leaving them with only their labour to sell. And while you can argue that this is a local protest, it is nonetheless a global issue because corporations are gaining more and more control over our food. And in South and Southeast Asia, the COVID-19 pandemic left garment workers owed somewhere between $3.2 and $5.8 billion in unpaid wages and legally owed compensation when high street brands cancelled orders or demanded huge discounts, forcing factories to close or to operate with reduced numbers of workers. Companies like Next that performed well during the pandemic in 2020 are now estimating profits of £670 million in 2021. But despite this, they were refusing to pay bonuses that were owed to workers at the bottom end of the supply chain. And these are bonuses that pay for essentials like school books, school uniforms, toiletries. They're not luxuries. But it was the collective power of the workers who walked out and refused to accept the denial of their bonus that led management to finally agree to pay it in full. And one of our partners, the FTZ union in Sri Lanka, is continuing that fight for workers who are still denied that pay. And as I said, organising in the garment sector is no picnic, and it does mean organising outside of the workplace to reach your 40% threshold. Now here in the UK, we've got companies like McDonald's who've been in receipt of UK government finance through furlough, job retention scheme or the Eat Out to Help Out, yet simultaneously have paid out dividends to their shareholders. So you have to ask, who did these schemes help? Workers' safety has been sacrificed for profit with demands made on those already low-paid workers that put them at risk through insufficient PPE or through stress because they're working in an environment that just may not be safe. And multinational companies and fashion brands are all too keen to point to the thousands of jobs that they've created. However, unless they ensure that the essential rights of workers in their supply chains are protected, this is not decent work, it's exploitation. And for too many, a bad job is still better than no job. And this has fueled a growth in precarious or zero-hour contract work. And we shouldn't forget that when we talk about unemployment, we're usually talking about unemployment in the formal economy with recognised workplaces and job titles. Yet it's estimated by the ILO that 2 billion people work in the informal economy, mostly in countries in the global south, with no social protection, no rights, and no decent work. But what we are not recognising is the knock-on effect that unemployment in the formal economy has on the informal economy, forcing many more people into poverty and insecurity. Now, the informal economy grew as a result of decisions made by the international financial institutions in the 90s, when governments were forced to privatise their public services and jobs were shed, sometimes overnight. And decisions made as a result of the pandemic could be just as ruthless. I've witnessed the head of the civil service in IT department in Zambia who lost his job overnight and now makes a living selling SIM cards on the street. And in the year when the UK hosts the COP26, the representatives of Labour must also have a seat at the table to talk about climate change and how we respond to it. And I'm pleased that we are having the conversation about a just transition and what a green jobs recovery can look like, because many of those workers whose jobs are going to be impacted are crying out for an easily digestible answer as to what that means for them in the real world. But what is absolutely key, though, is that any green recovery in the global north cannot just push the problem onto the global south, perpetuating the picture of poverty and inequality that has been significantly shaped by colonialism and the forms of political and economic power that followed. What's clear for the future of work is that going back to the pre-pandemic status quo will not deliver for working people. In fact, the status quo was the problem. Proper, decent work that addresses inequality and discrimination will have to be at the centre of any recovery plan. And the trade unions, wherever they are, must play a vital role if we really are going to build back better. As always, there is hope. And across the globe, social movements, workers and communities are acting together. And so, for example, War on Want, the TUC and 17 of our trade union affiliates issued a joint statement to show our solidarity with all those in India who, in the face of violent repression, standing up to protect their livelihoods and their right to organise. Usdaw wrote to the CEO of Next, where they have a recognition agreement here, to condemn the actions of the company's own factories in Sri Lanka, where they are refusing trade union recognition. And alongside a global alliance of unions and organisations, we're exposing Amazon's horrific employment practices. The need for us as an organisation and the labour movement to bring struggles together and to build power, while still fundamentally building on the strength of working people to self-organise, or for working people to come together, both within workplaces and internationally to create change, is as great now as it ever was. For it is this solidarity that is the levelling up we should be demanding, not the meaningless rhetoric we've heard over the last few months. Thank you.
Jackie, thank you for that. I should have introduced you as the trade union officer of War on Want and a member of the Morningstar Management Committee.
Thank you.
Apologies for not introducing you in that way.
Absolutely fine.
I'd also alert participants to the fact that the Derby Area Trades Union Council has submitted a motion to the Trades Council conference on the 12th of June, calling for support for the Indian farm workers. So for people involved in trades councils here, please take that up. And thank you very much for your introduction and the posting of the questions, Jackie. So brilliant. I'm going to move on to Mick Lynch, who is our next speaker. Mick Lynch, RMT General Secretary, new General Secretary to the RMT. And I'm delighted to introduce him, particularly as comrades supported Mick in his election to General Secretary. Mick was a fleet train engineer, and before that in the construction industry, where he was blacklisted. Great to see the continuation of the legacy of Bob Crow, and RMT militancy and leadership is in very good hands. I bet you get that said to you all the time, Mick, don't you? Onwards and upwards, comrades. So Mick, the screen is yours.
Well, it's not universal, Moz. You get it more from people outside the union in it sometimes, but that's the life of a trade union bureaucrat, as we're called. But I'm delighted to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. And it's been wonderful to listen to such inspirational speakers. I'll try to be on time as a railwoman, and I've got to get to Wembley after as well to watch Brentford in the playoffs. So I'll be quick. Tour de force. So obviously we're all facing similar pressures. I mean, we heard from the comrades in Spain about the new gig economy and the new platforms, but I think it's a very old form of exploitation. The means is different and the mode, but the principles are the same, to create division and exploit us so that we're all undercutting each other. You can go back to Robert Tressel and read all that stuff in the Ragged Trousers of Philanthropists, and workers have been dealing with it back to the spinning jenny and the agricultural clearances. So, you know, it's got a new face, but the stuff that we're involved in is the same old class struggle and the same exploitation. And we're gonna have that full on. And we've all worked out on this call that COVID and its consequences is a smokescreen for massive changes and massive exploitation. And that's going to be delivered through cuts. We've got the spending review coming up late, I think it's October or November. But those cuts are already happening because the departments, whether it's the health, education, local councils, or whoever is delivering services, is making cuts already. Of course, the companies that we all work for are delivering cuts because they want to recover some of the profits they may have lost during this period and use this next period, which may be quite a long period for some of us, as a tipping point. And I think we're really there. And the tipping point is the drive to casualisation, whatever way it manifests itself, whether it's the gig economy or being driven into the arms of the super exploiters, the outsourcing companies, as they're politely called, the ISS, Mighty, Serco, whichever one is in your area. And there are more and more coming, by the way. And some of these outsourcing companies are bigger than the companies they outsource from. So if you take Mighty, I think they've got 60 or 70,000 people in Britain. but they've got hundreds of thousands of people globally. The biggest employer in the railway, Network Rail, has only got 42,000 people. So these are companies that are literally seeking to take over the workplace. And if you look at what's happening in the NHS, my wife and partner is a veteran NHS worker. Everywhere you turn, private providers, as they're politely called, are taking over services. Now, many of us thought that would only be what would be called ancillary work, you know, the porterage, the catering, the cleaning, but they are taking over clinical practice rapidly and clinical diagnostics, lab work and all the rest of it, where we thought maybe complacently we would have secure work on pensions with terms and conditions and all the rest of it that we've built up for decades. Well, that is not only being undermined, it's been totally hollowed out by the casualisation drive. And we will have that on the railway and in transport. So if I give you a couple of examples, Irish Ferries, which sounds quite benign, it's a service I used to use in the old days going back home to Ireland, is now a super exploiter working on the Irish Sea. It's deliberately coming round the coast to Dover to run a rival service against DFDS, where we have a traditional collective agreement with pay, sick pay and all the rest of it. They are bringing in foreign labour, a foreign labour service from Latvia, below the minimum wage, below the standards of the Racial Equality Acts and all the rest of it, so that they can drive DFDS out of business. This is going right back to the 1870s, where companies sought to undercut each other directly, and the workers are caught in the crossfire. Stena and all the other maritime companies are responding in kind by cutting sick pay, seeking to cut hours and bring more outsourced labour, not just from Britain, but from abroad to super exploit them. So we're already seeing the seeds of that. And it's been mentioned by Helen earlier and other examples of how it's actually hollowing out our traditional, the pillars of our society, if you like, the education service, health, transport, and all the rest of it. On the railways, you've seen some of the stuff this week about the rebranding or the sticking plaster that's gone over the railway system with Great British Railways, where privatisation is re-embedded, and the stuff that we've got in the public sector is just the cracks are papered over. What they are also delivering is not put in the stuff, is that we're looking at up to £3 to £4.5 billion of cuts in the railway network, depending how you count it. And they are looking at massive job cuts and unemployment in the railway sector. The Daily Telegraph the Sunday Telegraph last week put that as up to 9,000 direct job cuts. But of course, they will be looking to casualise the remaining workforce, and that's already happened in cleaning and catering to some extent. And it will happen on the tube as well. The Labour mayor in London is caught between two pressures: the pressure of the Tory government, which is seeking to take out another £1.5 billion with two Tory directors sitting on the TfL board to dictate how he operates, and us, who's going to resist it. The railway unions and the RMT in particular will resist all of these job cuts. And we are in a position already where we reject entirely the railway company's agenda, which is the government's agenda. It's not even the DfT agenda. It's Rishi Sunak's Treasury agenda of delivering these cuts. So we are committed to a campaign of industrial action. We're already warming up 21,000 Network Rail members. We've put them on a dispute footing, and we will take them into action as soon as we get the concrete plans that they seek to impose on us. Because the best way of avoiding unemployment is avoiding job cuts in the first place, and giving other workers the strength and confidence of trade unions that are prepared to fight. And the RMT is going to turn back to the traditional methods of industrial unionism. And what that means for us, and it was said earlier, that no worker in the transport sector should be without contact from the trade union, that no workplace should be without representatives, and no group of workers should not be involved in an active campaign, whether it's in the community, whether it's in their own sector, or whether it's in their own company, through taking direct industrial action, not just to defend the jobs, but to defend their pay, which is under a public sector pay freeze, we've all seen, and their jobs and their conditions of service and their pensions that have been built up for so long. We are also going to face in that public sector borrowing review, the ideas of massive cuts in benefits, because the side effect of mass unemployment is always cuts in benefits, whether it be from the people, disability benefits and other welfare benefits, or direct unemployment benefit. They will cut and cut and cut so that we're forced to work for these super exploiters. So now more than ever, Moz, the message has got to be that we need a united labour movement. The trade unions have got to wake up. Those of them who think that you can keep your head down, put some kind of tin hat on and shake the hands of the employer and try and get some voluntary severance deal, which I'm afraid some some unions in the rail sector are already asking for publicly to sell the jobs of our members. If they think that that's the way forward for working people, employed or unemployed, they have got a very sore lesson coming for them and a reckoning, because I don't think workers are going to put up with that. We've got to make sure that we defend unemployed workers, that they're not exploited. We've got to defend employed workers so that the terms and conditions that we've built up are not corroded and decayed over the next few years. The RMT will be with you and any progressive elements, whether it's the People's Assembly or anyone else that comes to the fore. We will link up with all of you and we will prod and kick the TUC, the Labour Party, or anyone else that's shirking on this job. But on my watch as General Secretary, my union will remain a campaigning union, an industrial union that's prepared to help every worker in our sector and every worker in the economy and every worker internationally, as far as I'm concerned. And we will keep that campaigning stance, and we will fight for every job that we've got and every job that we need to get in this society. And all of the terms and conditions, everyone deserves a pay rise, everyone deserves good holiday pay, good sick pay, and excellent public services. That's got to be the joined up campaign that we've always fought for. And those politicians who don't want to do it, they better watch out, because I think the workers will be on the march in the next few years, and the RMT will be in the front ranks of that, and we will be a beacon for fighting industrial unionism. Thanks very much for listening. Cheers.
Mick, excellent. Thank you very, very much. And just to let you know that we'll be along there kicking and booting with you where it's required. Just before I call Andy Bain in, I just wanted to let you know that he'll be the last contributor today. He's going to focus on how we use all of the ideas and information around organising, how we use that in the 5th of June workshops. Andy, apologies, I have chaired so badly, we're a bit over time. So you haven't got 10 minutes, okay.
Okay, thanks very much, Moz, and thanks everybody. I think it's been a fantastic session. I've just looked at the numbers. We until about a minute ago were above 90 since we started, which is great, I think. I really just want to focus on what we're going to do next week, but using the fact that we've got so many good contributions and ideas and really forceful speeches. And I just loved Mick's bit at the end about the workers will be on the march, and that's what we need. So I just want to explain that what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at some of the key issues that come out of this today. We're going to sort of feed that into 8 different workshops we're going to run next week. And those will be covering probably, and we need to review this a bit more, but probably things like the Sheffield needs a pay rise thing and spreading that around the country. That'd be fantastic to be able to do that in, in the major cities across the country. A refocus and maybe relaunch of the Trades Council movement, which has been suggested before, and there was certainly a lot of contributions along those lines today. We need to build the People's Assembly locally from the base. We need to get different campaigns that are calling for progress together and working together. We need to get trade unions working together to resist and work together in disputes, and really develop new forms of solidarity, particularly where we've got precarious workers. So we need to be looking at that as well. So there's lots of ideas. We will pull things together, and hopefully out of next week we'll get what I call really the elements of a strategy, really, to build this movement that we need, that so many people are pointed towards. So I think that's all. Thanks very much, everybody. It's been a great success, and hopefully you can register next week as well. And bring people along, particularly when you see the themes of the workshops, which we'll send out, and try and get people that might fit into and work well under those different workshops and themes. So thanks very much.
Okay, Andy, thank you. In calling you in, I should have actually said that you are our party's trade union organiser, TSSA activist, as well as being president for 6 years past. That you're also on the executive of Islington Trade Union Council, and you represent the Morning Star and the People's Assembly National Committee. So thank you, Andy. Just before I end with a quote, I want to thank all the participants and speakers today. I want to remind you to sign up for the workshops next week. Ideas are great, but it's what we actually do with the ideas that will make a significant difference to our class. So just ending with a quote on unemployment: if we don't take up the fight at this time of crisis, when will we? The threats, challenges and opportunities are clear for the right to work, for the future of our people and our communities. It's time to act. Seize the time. Make sure you join with the Communist Party next week. Join the workshops. Thank you, comrades. Thank you for the assistance of my comrades in dealing with the chats. Thank you. Goodbye.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever, for in union we are strong. We're the women of the union in the forefront of the fight. We fight for women's issues, we fight for women's rights. We're prepared to fight for freedom, we're prepared to stand our ground. Women make our union strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever, for in union we are strong. It is we who wash the dishes, scrub the floors and clean the dirt, feed the kids and send them off to school, and then we go to work, where we work for half man's wages, for a boss who likes to flirt. Yeah, we make our union strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever, for in union we are strong. They divide us by our colour, they divide us by our tongue, they divide us men and women, they divide us old and young. But they'll tremble at our voices when they hear these verses sung. Women make our union strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever, for in union we are strong. Through our sisters and our brothers we can make our union strong. For respect and equal value we have done without too long. We no longer have to tolerate injustices and wrongs, for in union we are strong.